Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 6 important articles. There are 4 articles that require a comprehensive analysis, both for prelims and mains, and 2 small articles that are important just for the prelims exam. So let's cover these topics as comprehensively as possible so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are benefiting from our initiative, do support us with your likes and comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now, before we start, I have a very important announcement. As part of Republic Day celebration, Unacademy is providing a flat 60% off on our IAS courses. You can avail the 12-month subscription at just $23,499 and the 18-month subscription at $24,999. We promise that this is a tailor-made comprehensive course which will give you access to live classes and as well as test series, one-on-one mentorship and doubt resolution session along with the required study material. This course will ensure that you will realize your IAS dream, and worst case if you don't, we provide CSE Assure where you get a free extension on your IAS course if God forbid if you don't clear the exam. So do enroll for the program using the code IAS English in order to avail the flat 60% discount. With this, let's get started, and please ensure you join my Telegram channel because after the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF of the class on my Telegram channel. So scan the QR code, and as soon as the session gets over, I'll share the PDF. Do join our official Unacademy IAS English Telegram channel as well. The link is provided in the video description because every day after the session ends, we conduct a daily quiz on these topics so you can quickly revise them and go through these articles again. So let's start with the discussion by looking at this important column on page number 8. This article is relevant for social justice and as well as for polity. The article is focused upon classification of the denotified tribes and the nomadic, semi-nomadic tribes in India. See, historically, the tribal communities of India have suffered oppression and discrimination. They have largely been left out from the mainstream process of development. They have been denied their equal rights for not just decades but for centuries. But even today, there are several denotified tribes, nomadic, semi-nomadic tribes, which do not enjoy all the benefits of the welfare programs and the reservation policy that the government has brought in for tribal welfare. In this regard, there is a very important development, a very important update. So let's understand this and let's dive a little deep into this topic. Recently, the Anthropological Survey of India, or ANSI, and the Tribal Research Institutes, they have completed a detailed study of all the denotified nomadic and semi-nomadic tribes, and they have submitted this report to the government. Several communities which were excluded from the list of denotified tribes or nomadic, semi-nomadic tribes, they've all been classified for the first time ever since independence. And this report has now been submitted to the government. According to this report, around 268 denotified semi-nomadic, nomadic tribes have been categorized for the first time. And these research institutions, which have applied ethnographic study, they've applied the anthropological lens to study about these indigenous communities of India. And out of the 268 that have been classified for the first time, they have recommended that 179 of these communities should be included under scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and OBCs so that they can enjoy the benefits of reservation and welfare programs that are provided for the tribal communities in the country. Out of these communities, 85 of them have been recommended for reservation and welfare programs for the first time. So this is the big development. A few months ago, the Anthropological Survey of India and the Tribal Research Institutes have completed this survey this anthropological study and provided the recommendations to a special committee that the government had constituted. Now, first, let's understand who exactly are the denotified tribes. What is the history of the denotified tribes? And then we will look at the issues related to these tribal communities. See, under the British Raj during the colonial period, several tribal communities, they were not only discriminated and left out from mainstream development, but they were targeted by the colonial administration as well. Since the tribal communities would often resist any kind of colonial control over forest and tribal resources, they would often rebel against any authoritative enforcement of British laws, and they would even target British interests. So, in this context, the colonial government had basically labeled several tribes of India as criminal tribes through various acts that were passed between 1871 and 1940s. During these 70 to 80 years, from late 1800s to mid 1950s, during this period, under the colonial government, several tribes in India were notified as criminal tribes and they were treated as criminals. Just because of their membership of a tribal community, just because they belong to a tribal community, they would be treated as criminals and they would be prosecuted as well under the law. So the British Raj dealt with several tribes in India in a very harsh, draconian manner, which violated the rights of these tribal communities. This aggravated the oppression of the community and the further discrimination against such communities. In fact, it was only from 1949 onwards that these tribes were denotified. Starting from 1949 till 1952, all these laws which had declared several tribes as criminal tribes, they were repealed in post-independent India. Hence, these tribes came to be known as the denotified tribes. Because previously the British Raj had notified them as criminals. Now, post-independence, the government of India was repealing all these laws, these colonial draconian laws, and denotifying them and bringing them back into mainstream. So there was an urgent need to recognize these tribes, to classify them into nomadic, semi-nomadic tribes. Because these indigenous ethnic tribal communities, they have a very distinct culture. Usually they are in very small numbers, and without adequate support and protection from the state, some of these groups might even vanish. They might assimilate with other groups, or they might even migrate to other places. Their very survival would be under threat. Their very culture, their language, their unique faith which they practice could be under threat. Now, if you look at the livelihood of most of these tribal communities, some of them were forest-dwelling tribes. So their livelihood was also very limited. They would practice basic hunting, grazing of their cattle, or collect minor forest produce, or practice basic agriculture. Or they would have certain specific occupation, right? A very limited occupation, which would be the only source of livelihood for these communities, which meant that the communities were more vulnerable. Their financial security was never guaranteed. They were never given the equal status in the society. And as a result, several of these tribes would face multiple disadvantages. In order to uplift these communities and ensure that equity is provided, to ensure that we focus on inclusive development, the government began the effort to recognize these denotified tribes, nomadic and semi-nomadic tribes, and to classify them so that they could be brought under the ambit of reservation. They could be classified as scheduled tribes, scheduled castes, or in some cases as OBCs, and provided with appropriate reservation in government jobs, in education, to provide for the social upliftment of these communities. This would also make them eligible for various welfare programs run by the government with focus on social justice and social empowerment. So this was the primary purpose, to denotify and recognize and classify these tribes. But if you look at the initial efforts that were made, it was never sufficient. The first ever Backward Classes Commission, headed by Kaka Kalelkar, the first Backward Classes Commission, it failed to recognize and classify most of the denotified tribes and nomadic and semi-nomadic tribes. Though it recognized some of the backward classes in the country, several tribal communities, forest-dwelling tribes, denotified tribes, were left out. So in many ways, these communities which were denotified with the repealing of the Criminal Tribes Act, they never really saw progress or development, and they did not really enjoy the benefits of reservation and welfare programs. Subsequently, we had many other committees look into the aspect of reservation. We had the Lokur Committee, 1965, the Mandal Commission of 1980, which paved the way for OBC reservation. More recently, we had the Renke Commission of 2008 under the then UPA government. And in 2017, the Idate Commission that was set up by the Modi government. These are the various committees that have looked into the classification of the denotified tribes and semi-nomadic and nomadic tribes of India. But none of them could do a comprehensive job because primarily the studies that were conducted were focused on the political aspect. The political aspect of reservation was the primary focus. But for the first time, now we have applied the anthropological lens to conduct an ethnographic study to identify and classify these tribes based on anthropological grounds, based on a scientific basis. In fact, this recommendation to conduct such a study came out of the Idate Commission itself. In 2017, when Bhikkhu Ramji Idate, who headed the Idate Commission, submitted the report to the government, the commission was of the opinion that there are at least 1,200 such tribes which have never been classified and categorized. So it recommended to the government to conduct a thorough scientific study by applying the anthropological lens. So following this recommendation of the Idate Commission, the Prime Minister's office took up this recommendation very seriously, and in 2019, it constituted a special committee headed by the Vice Chairperson of Niti Aayog. A special committee was set up in 2019, chaired by the Vice Chairperson of Niti Aayog. It is this special committee which ordered the study to be conducted by the Anthropological Survey of India and the Tribal Research Institutes. So the study started in 2020. It went on for almost 3 years, and in end of 2023, the reports were submitted. And now the special committee is looking into these reports, looking into these recommendations. And finally, the government might even implement the recommendations given by the Anthropological Survey of India and the Tribal Research Institutes. So it's in this context that the article is looking at this important issue. Now, if you look at the need for reservation for these communities, if you look at the welfare related issues faced by these communities, there are some important points that we need to observe. Back in 2022, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Social Justice and Empowerment also had flagged the same issue, that there are several denotified tribes, nomadic, semi-nomadic tribes, which have not been recognized, which have not enjoyed the benefits of welfare, the benefits of reservation, which is otherwise given to SCs and STs and even the OBCs. So now with scientific data available through this anthropological classification, for the first time we can look beyond the politics of reservation and focus more on the anthropological need to protect some of the tribal communities of India and accordingly provide them protection in the form of reservation under SC, ST, OBC category. Also target few welfare schemes specifically meant for these groups which are newly recognized and categorized. The Tribal Affairs Ministry can come out with maybe a dedicated program for some of these denotified tribes which are being recognized and classified for the first time. They could be included in existing categories of reservation, or maybe the government can contemplate an entirely new classification within the constitution by including a separate schedule for these denotified tribes and nomadic and semi-nomadic tribes. So there are various options available in front of the government. So now the special committee, which was set up by the Prime Minister's office, is examining this report, and the Niti Aayog will play a critical role in the implementation of this report. Because this special committee is headed by the Vice Chairperson of Niti Aayog. So according to reports, the Niti Aayog is finalizing its recommendations to the government based on the findings of the study conducted by the Anthropological Survey of India and the Tribal Research Institutes. So once the recommendations are finalized, the government, which is likely to approve them, will start implementing these changes, which will finally bring about inclusiveness, bring about greater recognition for these tribes, And more importantly, it will include them in the development process. It will make them eligible for the welfare benefits offered by the government, including the policy of affirmative action that provides for reservation for such backward communities. So that is the relevance of this topic. Now, based on this, you can even expect mains questions. Maybe there can be prelims questions on the committees that we mentioned, right? But you can expect mains questions as well on this topic. So please take up this question for your answer writing practice. Classifying and categorizing all the denotified, nomadic, semi-nomadic tribes is crucial for securing social justice to these communities. Examine. So you can discuss how these communities have been historically left out. Maybe start out with an introduction by talking about the Criminal Tribes Act, how under British Raj, these tribal communities of India were not only left out and discriminated, but they were targeted as well. Then provide the historical context as to why they were denotified post-independence. And even after that, they could never enjoy the benefits of reservation and welfare because many of these tribes were never classified and recognized. Talk about the various committees, how their work fell short of this requirement. And finally, it was based on Idate Commission's report that the government constituted this special committee headed by the Vice Chairperson of Niti Aayog, which has commissioned this anthropological study. Bring out the findings of this report that 268 such tribes have been identified, and the institutions have recommended that at least 179 of them should be included under SC, ST, OBC category. So then you can discuss how this can benefit these communities in terms of education, employment, their overall welfare, and then conclude your answer. So let's see how many of you can write an answer to this question, and please post your answers in the comment section. Now let's look at the next article from page number 7. This article is relevant for social issues under GS1 and polity under GS2. The article here is focused upon the legal age for marriage for men and women. I hope you know that the legal age for men and women to get married is different in our country. For men, it is 21 years. For women, it is 18 years. This is based on the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act of 2006. As child marriage has been a social evil in our country. Child marriage has a detrimental impact on both the genders, be it the male or the female, right, who is pushed into a child marriage by the family because of familial pressure, societal pressure. They face a number of challenges. Their education gets disrupted. Their fundamental right to choose their partner is compromised. Even their sexual reproductive health could take a hit. Their overall economic well-being could be affected because minor children, especially those under the age of 18 years, will be in no position to handle these complexities. And child marriage leaves behind a lasting impact on the couple who have been pushed into such practices. And it has a disproportionate impact on the girl child, especially as the girl child grows and reaches the age of maturity by 18 years. The woman in this marriage would go on to face a disproportionate impact in terms of economic well-being, health, and sexual reproductive health. So this evil had to be eradicated from our society. It was largely a result of orthodox religious practices, social norms and customs, and as well as the patriarchy prevalent in the Indian society. There have been cases where the bride essentially would be a minor who would be forced to marry an older adult male. Again, it was a result of the patriarchal practices which has been prevalent, which is still prevalent in many parts of India. So to undo this social evil, the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act was enacted by the Parliament, and it recognizes the legal age of marriage as 21 years for men, 18 years for women. But however, there is a fundamental problem over here. Now, if you look at the Majority Act, which is a British era law, it maintains that 18 years is when an individual attains majority, irrespective of the gender, be it a male or a female child. Once they attain the age of 18 years, they are seen as a major, as an adult. This is a global standard practice as well. But when it comes to Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, there is a gender-based distinction in terms of the age limit that has been set. And this creates numerous problems when it comes to annulling the child marriages. Now, if you look at the provisions of the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, it provides both the parties in the marriage a right to annul their child marriage. Now, let's say, for example, let's say a girl of 12 years of age has been forcefully married with a boy of 16 years of age. Both are minors, children, forced by their families and society to get into this marriage. So according to the law, once they become adults, once they reach the majority age threshold, both of them can seek annulment of such a marriage, but the condition is it should be done within 2 years. Within 2 years after they attain the legal age of marriage. So this is where the ambiguity arises. So should we consider 18 years as the threshold, which gives up to 20 years of their age for both the bride and the groom to annul the marriage? Or should we consider the legal age of marriage which has been set, where there is a gender-based difference? So should it be 20 years for women and 23 years for men? Or should it be common 20 years for both men and women? So this has been open for legal interpretation due to the ambiguity present in the law. Because Prohibition of Child Marriage Act simply states that any party who got married as a child, be it the bride or the groom, they can seek annulment of the marriage as long as the petition is filed within 2 years of attaining majority. So here, if you take the literal interpretation of this, attaining majority, what does it mean? What does it mean? Attaining majority, according to Majority Act 1875, would mean once you complete age of 18 years, which means the time limit here for both the bride and the groom is 20 years. Until they attain 20 years of age, they have a right, a legal right to seek the annulment of such a child marriage. But in several cases, courts have interpreted the attaining of majority here as the legal age for marriage which is permitted under the law, which is different for men and women. If you apply this standard, if you take the legal permissible age for marriage for men and women, which has been kept different, and apply 18 and 21 years as the legal age for marriage, treat this as the maturity date, and then apply 2 years on this, you will get 20 years and 23 years for women and men respectively. Now, this age-based distinction creates multiple problems. Now, if you ask why the legal age for marriage is kept different for men and women, it has been primarily kept separate, keeping in mind the patriarchal tendencies in the society. See, generally, men are expected to be the breadwinners, to provide financial security, whereas women are assumed to be the child bearers in a marital relationship. This is purely the orthodox, conservative, patriarchal mindset which has driven this particular difference in the legal age for marriage, right? Of course, the government has recently made a push to change this as well. In 2021, the government tried to push for an amendment to the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act to set the same age limit for both men and women as far as the legal age for marriage was concerned, which should be ideally 18 years or maybe 21 years. The government was pushing for 21 years because the government was keeping in mind the overall independence of women and the health of women, including their sexual reproductive rights, so that they can delay their marriage. So government was looking at a common 21-year age limit to be the legal age for marriage. But this amendment has not gone through. But now when such cases come up for annulment of these child marriages, courts have different interpretations, and this has led to multiple problems. For example, in 2011, the Madras High Court, which dealt with the T. Shivakumar versus the Inspector of Police case, it interpreted that the term majority referred to in the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act, if it is taken as 20, then it deprives those men who were married between 18 to 21 years of age. It deprives them the right to annul the marriage. So based on this interpretation, the Madras High Court interpreted that the age limit for annulment for male should be 23, whereas the annulment for female should be at 20. It basically took the legal age for marriage, not the majority age as prescribed under the Majority Act, creating a distinction between men and women, a gender-based distinction as far as annulment of child marriage was concerned. Now, in a recent verdict by the Allahabad High Court, we have seen this interpretation being challenged in the Sanjay Chaudhary case. In the Sanjay Chaudhary case, both the bride and groom were minors when they got married, when they were pushed into a child marriage. Both of them filed for annulment, but however, the groom had crossed the age limit as prescribed under the law. So Allahabad High Court held that we should re-examine the age limit which has been set for annulment of such marriages. We should re-examine the age limit for marriage itself and ensure that the gender-based discrimination is removed, because this violates the principle of equity, right? Gender-based equity is being compromised when you create such distinctions. So Allahabad High Court provided a counter argument, but eventually it went with the Supreme Court verdict on this matter. Supreme Court has held that the separate age for men and women is valid, as the law provides for that, and it provides for the interpretation that men can apply for annulment of child marriage until the age of 23, because the legal age set for marriage is 21. But Allahabad High Court had a valid argument, a counter argument, that if, let's say, men above 18 years are treated as adults for every matter, then why make a distinction when it comes to child marriage? Now, you look at how Majority Act applies above the age of 18 years. Once you attain your adulthood, right, you are eligible for accessing all the basic rights, from your political rights, which includes your voting right, to even buying property, selling property, to signing contracts, right? All these basic legal rights are already provided to anyone attaining the age of 18 years. But why the distinction when it comes to marriage? So as I said, the exception which was done previously was primarily because of the patriarchal nature of the society. But the government has made an attempt to rectify this. But the writers argue that if 21 years is made the legal age for marriage, then Prohibition of Child Marriage Act could be misused, especially by the families of the girl child. In cases where love marriage is involved, right, where two young adults or minors run away and get married. Let's say two minors are in love and they are minors, they run away and get married. In such cases, the family might file cases seeking annulment of the marriage, which goes against the wish of the two partners, which might be a consensual relationship. Or imagine a case where there is a adult male of, let's say, 20 years and a minor girl child of 17 years. They are in a consensual love relationship, they want to get married, but the family is opposing it, so they might run away, get married. Tomorrow the family might file a case saying this is a child marriage and the case should be annulled, or the marriage should be basically annulled by the courts. Such cases will come up if you set a higher bar for legal age for marriage at 21 years. So writers believe that 18 years should be the perfect age limit, and more importantly, there should be parity. There should be no gender-based distinction here, both for men and women. It should be at 18 years, where they can seek annulment of child marriages up till 20 years. So this could solve multiple problems that are currently being faced by several couples, especially those who have been pushed into child marriages, and also those who are in consensual love marriages, where family is in opposition, right? Especially the girl child faces significant pressure. Many cases that have been filed under the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act stems from these cases as well. Studies have shown that. So it's high time that we re-examine the legal age for marriage, bring it down maybe to 18 years, set a standard irrespective of the gender, and ensure that annulment of child marriage is permitted until 20 years of age. This will bring parity. This will ensure that the rights of women as well as the rights of men is protected equally without any discrimination. So please take up a practice question based on this. There is a need for an uniform age of marriage in India, discussed in the context of provisions of the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act. Now let's look at the next article. Let's look at this important column on page number 6 related to the budgetary allocation that is often provided to Ministry of External Affairs. See, we are just few days away from the union budget being presented, right? So whenever we talk about the budget, We always focus upon budgetary allocation for infrastructure, budgetary allocation for defense, or the taxation policy which is being pushed through the budget, or we focus on the welfare schemes and programs. But usually attention is not paid to foreign policy. What is the budgetary allocation for foreign policy of India? Today, foreign policy has become all the more important. It has always been important. It has become all the more important given India's rise as a global power. If India has to realize its dream of becoming a developed nation by 2047, a Viksit Bharat by 2047, our global engagement is going to be critical. Our partnership with our friends, with global powers, with global institutions and organizations, and even with the small countries, the poor, developing, underdeveloped countries of the global south. These partnerships, bilateral, multilateral partnerships, are critical to enable the rise of India. But however, if you look at the budgetary allocation over the years, the MEA has always been neglected. The allocation given to Ministry of External Affairs is very, very low when compared to other sectors and other ministries. So let's evaluate this, the argument the writers are making, why there should be higher budgetary allocation for foreign policy, why higher allocation should be given in the budget for Ministry of External Affairs. So let's take a look at this. Now, if you look at data from 2017 to 2023, during this period, the budgetary allocation for Ministry of External Affairs increased by an average of just 4% year on year. If you compare two consecutive budgets and see the increase in budgetary allocation, it has been just 4% increase every year from 2017 to 2023. This is extremely low budgetary allocation, and it doesn't even offset the inflationary trends. From 2023 to 2024, we did see a significant jump where the Modi government provided a 23% increase in budgetary allocation for Ministry of External Affairs. But if you look at the percentage of budgetary allocation given to MEA as a percentage of the total budgetary expenditure, believe it or not, MEA gets just 0.4% of the total budgetary expenditure. This is abysmally low. If you look at other countries, look at their allocation for foreign policy, it is usually 1% and above of their total expenditure. There are countries which spend up to 1.5 to 2% of their total expenditure on foreign relations. Whereas India, which is emerging as a global power, which has critical relations to maintain, is spending just 0.4% of the total budgetary expenditure. A parliamentary standing committee on external affairs in 2022 had recommended that we should increase this to 1% at least. The Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs a couple of years ago had recommended that the budgetary allocation should go up to at least 1% of the total budgetary expenditure. Right now it's at 0.4%. Now see, a jump from 0.4 to 1% may be unreasonable. It might be unrealistic to expect that the government might provide a sudden jump which is more than double the allocation. That may not happen. Even if this increases to, let's say, 0.6, 0.8% of the total budgetary expenditure, even that is a big win for Ministry of External Affairs. So the writers are making a strong case for increasing the budgetary expenditure for Ministry of External Affairs to 0.6 to 0.8% of the total budgetary allocation. Now, it's important to understand why the MEA needs such kind of funds. Why does the Ministry of External Affairs require additional budgetary allocation? What does it do with all that money? Let's take a look. The MEA maintains critical relations in the neighborhood. As part of our neighborhood first policy, we give utmost priority to our neighboring countries from Bhutan to Nepal to Bangladesh. And you all know what's happening in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood has always been affected by crisis and volatility. Nepal has gone through long periods of political crisis. Bangladesh has recently witnessed a political upheaval. Maldives had often been seen as anti-India. Sri Lanka has gone through an economic crisis. So all across our neighborhood, there are multiple problems and challenges. It's important to stabilize the region and exert India's influence to protect our interests. And one way to exert your influence is to provide aid and grants. especially when small countries, poor developing nations, underdeveloped countries, when they need assistance and support during their times of need, you need to step up as a regional global power, provide aids and grants to some of these countries and assist them. You need to provide loans, concessional loans, as investment to take up key projects so that you can help small countries realize their ambition when it comes to infrastructure creation. Plus, you can exert your influence and gain a strategic hold over key projects, which gives us geopolitical influence in the region. So MEN needs a lot of funding to provide aid and grants to certain countries. At the same time, to provide concessional loans and investments to other countries. So MEA spends extensively on this. Now, if you look at the neighborhood of India, almost 50% of the aid and grants which we provide is going to our neighboring countries. Can you guess which country receives the highest aid and grant from India? I told you that 50% of aid and grant given by MEA is going for our neighboring countries amongst all the countries in the world. Now, can you tell me which country in our neighborhood gets the highest allocation of aid and grant from India? This will tell you a lot about India's relations with that country. Sri Lanka? No. It is actually Bhutan. Historically, Bhutan has been the largest recipient of aid and grants from India. In fact, there was a time when India would basically finance the budget of Bhutan. Bhutan also had implemented 5-year plans just like India. These 5-year plans of Bhutan and its yearly budget was financed through Indian budget. So if you look at the economic survey, which is released before the budget, there is a chapter on foreign policy, the allocation for foreign relations. Bhutan always is at the top of the list. So historically, we have always given budgetary support and financial support because we have helped Bhutan in key infrastructure, from roads and bridges to hydropower projects. And today, Bhutan has become more self-reliant. And today, it's exporting electricity, hydropower to other countries, including India. So it is Indian investments, Indian aid and grant, which has helped Bhutan to achieve this. So Bhutan receives the highest aid and grant from India. If you look at loans, the investments that we provide, concessional loans, which we call as lines of credit or line of credit, Bangladesh stands at the top. Over the last few years, Bangladesh has received nearly $7.8 billion in concessional loans from India. A line of credit is nothing but a concessional loan where the repayment terms are very flexible, where a flexible repayment period is provided lasting several years so that it doesn't become a burden on the borrowing country to repay. And the interest rate is very low. Nominal interest rates are charged. And since India is the one providing this concessional loan, we can even pick and choose the sector or the projects where the loans will be utilized. We can even place conditions on the loan that those critical projects should be awarded to Indian companies so that the money essentially circulates back. Of course, these loans will be paid back with interest at a nominal rate with a very flexible repayment period. So it's flexible for the borrowing country as well. And it gives enormous benefits for us. It will not only give us that influence, that goodwill in another country, it will also give us hold over strategic infrastructure projects where Indian companies can construct and operate and execute these critical projects that will give us geopolitical influence in the region. So such investments of India has been crucial. Look at the Kaladan project, for example, in Myanmar. The various projects we have taken up in Sri Lanka, in Afghanistan. This has all been possible because of the loans that we have given out, the lines of credit, or the aid and grant that we have provided. Almost 45% of the grants that the line of credit that we provide is focused on our neighborhood. That shows that neighborhood is of utmost priority to India. Neighboring countries are getting 50% of the aid and grant, which need not be repaid. This is basically one-time grant or assistance. 45% of the loans, line of credit, also is aimed at neighboring countries. That shows how MEA is utilizing the funds to boost our neighborhood first policy. Similarly, we provide assistance to global south countries from around the world, poor African nations, small island countries in the Pacific or in the Caribbean. They all receive aids and grant from India, and lines of credit from India. For example, during the pandemic, we provided aid and grant for several countries. We have funded several critical projects in small countries through concessional loans, through lines of credit. You take Fiji, for example, right? Or African countries like Tanzania, Kenya. They have been beneficiaries of India's concessional loans. So that is why MEA needs higher allocation in the budget. And not only that, the MEA is facing a critical crunch of resources. MEA doesn't have enough diplomats from the Indian Foreign Service. I'm sure many of you are well aware that in each year's civil services examination, the vacancies for IFS is very, very few, hardly under 30 or 25, sometimes going up to 40, 45. The number of IFS officers being recruited is very minimal. We are just meeting the bare minimum requirement. We don't have sufficient training facilities, capacity building programs to build the resources of the Ministry of External Affairs to conduct the foreign policy of India. Now compare this with even small countries like Singapore. Singapore has more diplomats than India. Right? For a large country like India with such critical interests, we are understaffed, under-resourced. The MEA lacks the human resource itself. It lacks the support staff that is necessary to assist the IFS officers. There isn't adequate focus on research. If MEA gets more allocation, it can fund more think tanks, recruit more scholars into the ministry to conduct historical research and scholarly research, which is immensely beneficial for foreign policy decision making. That is why the MEA needs additional funds. Right now it is strapped for cash. 0.4% of budgetary allocation is nowhere sufficient to meet these requirements. It is just barely satisfying the bare minimum. So what MEA needs is at least 0.6 to 0.8% of the budgetary allocation so that it can ensure that it has adequate resources. It can focus on research, recruit and train more staff, have more diplomats who can be deployed around the world in Indian missions, and ensure we provide more aid and loans. This is what will generate the goodwill for India, create the soft power influence, and also give us a hold on key strategic projects. If India has to counter the massive investments that China makes under its Belt and Road Initiative, if India has to compete with the kind of grants that China can provide and other countries can provide, then MEA deserves a higher budgetary allocation. So the writers make a strong argument for this, a strong case. So let's see if Nirmala Sitharaman can satisfy this demand in a few days. Now coming to an important editorial on page number 6. It's related to a controversial tungsten mining project which was proposed in Tamil Nadu near Madurai. See, tungsten is a very precious mineral. Tungsten is a critical strategic mineral, very rare in its occurrence, found in very few regions of the world, and it has critical applications in the industry. It's a dense, lustrous metal, and it finds enormous application in the defense industry, in high-tech industries, because of its unique properties. And there is no substitute, no alternative to replace tungsten. Its availability is limited to certain parts of the world, and India does have some tungsten resources. For example, in states like Tamil Nadu, Haryana, Uttarakhand, then as well as in West Bengal, there are sufficient reserves of tungsten. Even in states like Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, quite large reserves of tungsten has been discovered. We would like to explore and exploit these reserves, as it is a critical strategic mineral that finds application in many sensitive industries, especially in defense, aerospace, electronics, and high-tech industries. So obviously there is a global competition to mine tungsten, to get a hold on tungsten reserves, and India recently was looking at launching a mining block in Madurai, near Madurai in Tamil Nadu, to take up a tungsten mining project. But this project ran into a controversy. It faced stiff opposition from the local community, from the state government of Tamil Nadu. The state government of Tamil Nadu even raised a criticism against the central government, which had issued the mining license to start the mining at this mining block. The Tamil Nadu government alleged that the center had never fully consulted the state government. That despite the state government's opposition, center had gone ahead. But center dismissed these allegations by stating that the government of Tamil Nadu had been consulted. And now government of Tamil Nadu is only raising opposition on political grounds. So this became a political controversy between the center and the state. Now let's see what is the issue here with regard to this mining block near Madurai. See, the mining block which has been notified and which was supposed to be a part of this mining project, it includes a biodiversity heritage site. You might have heard about Aritapatti near Madurai. Please make a note, very important for your prelims as well. Aritapatti is the first biodiversity heritage site of Tamil Nadu. It is blessed with a unique ecological heritage, with rich flora and fauna, and more importantly, it is also blessed with important cultural sites. So Tamil Nadu's first ever biodiversity heritage site, Aritapatti, would have been a part of this mining block. It is also home to many temples of historical value, including few Jain temples. Tamil Brahmi scripts have been found in this vicinity. So the site is of great archaeological, historical, cultural, and even spiritual significance. So local communities started opposing the project on these grounds. The local people started opposing the project on social, cultural, and environmental grounds. The Tamil Nadu government, which saw the hesitance and the reluctance of the local people, then started raising its voice against the project, which indicates a possible political motive. That the government of Tamil Nadu, which has now opposed the project, may not be opposing it on environmental grounds or genuine social cultural grounds. Maybe the party in power is looking at the political interests, because the local community has been reluctant to accept this project and to support this project. So Tamil Nadu government raised the allegation that the center never fully consulted with it. But center says it had consulted, Tamil Nadu government had approved it. Now just because there is opposition from the local community, the government is siding with the locals and then criticizing the project. Now let's leave the political controversy aside. Doesn't matter. It's not relevant for the exam. What really matters here is how should India handle such local opposition when it comes to critical projects. See, there is no doubt that India needs critical minerals, strategic minerals like tungsten. If we have to power our military modernization, our defense indigenization, and boost our technology-based industries, we need critical strategic minerals like tungsten. There is no doubt about it. We can't rely on imports. We have to domestically procure whatever reserves are available. We have to exploit them and ensure we use it for nation building. But at the same time, these projects cannot damage the environment. It can't damage the social, cultural values associated with the site. We need to keep in mind the environmental, social, cultural obligations as well. So what you need is a fine balance. Sustainable model of resource exploitation is what is necessary. And this requires both center and state to behave responsibly. See, eventually, the blame game can continue between center and state, but that doesn't matter. What matters is, will we be able to protect our environmental, social, cultural rights while balancing it with our strategic need? It is that balance which is necessary. That sustainable model is what is necessary for India to ensure that such critical strategic minerals are mined. It is necessary for nation building. At the same time, we should ensure such projects will not compromise our social, cultural, and environmental purposes. Now, for example, the editorial suggests that maybe we can consider a redrawing of the mining block. Some of the delicate, sensitive areas could be left out, like Aritapatti, and few ecologically rich areas, culturally rich areas can be left out of this mining block, and mining can continue in other parts of the mining block. So right now, the government has put a complete hold, because even the central government, the ruling party at center, is worried about the political impact, essentially the votes. The ruling parties at both center and state appear to be driven by the vote bank agenda. They should actually be bothered more about the environmental, social, cultural consequences. How will they balance that with the developmental needs of India? So that is what is necessary, and that is the key point being raised by this editorial. It's urging the political parties at the center and state to keep aside their political differences, their political motives. Political parties will always have their vote bank agenda. It's urging the government, the editorial is urging the two governments to keep that aside for a while and think about the genuine problems that are present. How do we balance our developmental need with the need to protect our culture, society, and our environmental needs? So with this, I complete the detailed analysis of all the big articles in today's newspaper. Now let's take a quick look at the prelim section. On page number 5, we have an article related to NTCA, National Tiger Conservation Authority. Recently, there was a tragic case in Wayanad in Kerala, where a man-eating tiger had allegedly mauled a woman, a tribal woman, to death, following which a hunt was launched for this man-eating tiger. Eventually, this tiger was found dead under very suspicious circumstances. So the NTCA has sought a report from the Kerala Forest Department regarding the circumstances surrounding the death of this man-eating tiger in Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary. That is the development. So this brings into notice, this brings into our focus a statutory body known as NTCA. So let's understand what is NTCA. UPSC is known to ask static questions based on such statutory bodies. The National Tiger Conservation Authority was created in the year 2005, and it functions as a statutory body under Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. It has been given legal backing under the Wildlife Protection Act. The Wildlife Protection Act was amended in 2006, through which the National Tiger Conservation Authority the National Tiger Conservation Authority was given statutory status, and it plays a pivotal role in implementing Project Tiger, in managing the tiger reserves of India, and it also deserves much of the credit for the increase in the tiger population in the last 2 decades. Because see, by 2005, India's tiger population had depleted to alarming numbers. It was Prime Minister Manmohan Singh who revived Project Tiger, and it has been taken forward by the Modi government. So last 2 decades, we have seen a revival in tiger population, and the 4-year tiger census clearly indicates that Project Tiger has seen tremendous success, where we have substantially increased the tiger population in the wild. So NTCA performs this pivotal role to set up tiger reserves, to manage tiger reserves, and to implement Project Tiger. The composition of this statutory body is very important. It is headed by the Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change as the chairperson, with the MOS acting as the vice chairperson, with 3 MPs from the Parliament and the Secretary of the Environment Ministry as another member. This is the composition of National Tiger Conservation Authority. What are the powers and functions? It provides the final approval for tiger conservation plan prepared by state governments once establishment of a tiger reserve is approved by the National Wildlife Board or the National Board for Wildlife. The NBW is the apex authority to approve the establishment of protected areas such as national parks, tiger reserves, etc. So once center and state work together to establish such protected areas such as a tiger reserve, the NTCA will provide final approval for the tiger conservation plan, which the state government has to conceptualize. So in all the tiger reserves of the country, it is NTCA which acts as the statutory authority to maintain the ecology, to protect the ecosystem, and to prevent the hunting and poaching of tigers and maintain a healthy population of tigers across the tiger reserves. So it works in close coordination with the state forest departments. It even maintains a degree of superintendence over the state forest departments. It can ask them for reports. It can issue guidelines to be followed by the state forest departments, be it with regard to tourism, ecotourism, without affecting the environmental concerns, and making rules for managing tiger reserves, dealing with man-animal conflict incidents, right? And guidelines on how to deal with man-eating tigers. These guidelines are given by the NTCA, which are to be strictly followed by the state forest departments. So that is the pivotal role of NTCA. It also works with the local communities. Because under Project Tiger, there is a lot of focus on community involvement, community-led conservation. You need local people to participate in the conservation of the tiger and the ecosystem, or else the project would never succeed. So taking care of the livelihood interests of the local community, ensuring that man-animal conflict incidents do not affect the livelihood and the safety of the locals, providing them compensation in case of a tiger attack, right? Encouraging locals and spreading awareness amongst them to take part in the conservation effort. That is also the role of the NTCA. It reports to the Parliament and mainly provides for center-state coordination in managing and protecting the tiger reserves of India. So that is the role of NTCA. Now coming to the last article for today on page 12. The WHO has issued a new set of recommendations with regard to excess salt consumption. The table salt that we all consume, that we all like in our food, which is basically sodium chloride, is essentially a slow poison. Because the sodium which is present in the table salt that we consume, it essentially works with our blood, fills with water, leading to inflammation, which in turn affects the blood flow, the blood circulation, leading to dietary non-communicable diseases such as blood pressure, high blood pressure, which causes cardiovascular diseases, kidney ailments, etc. So high salt consumption is directly linked with lifestyle-related dietary diseases and non-communicable disorders, where there is a higher risk of cardiac arrest, strokes, which are cardiovascular diseases caused by high blood pressure, and several kidney ailments as well. So WHO has set a strict limit for salt consumption, and the latest limit as laid down by WHO is no more than 2 grams of salt per day. But most of us, I'm sure, we consume much higher levels of salt, especially if you look at Indian food, for example, right? It tends to be quite high with regard to the salt content, and especially the processed food, the junk food, it is loaded with salt. So consumption of such high salt on a daily basis is a big health hazard, and WHO has set a limit of 2 grams per day as far as sodium chloride is concerned, because the sodium plays a role in manipulating the blood circulation. It affects the blood supply as it retains more water. It basically leads to more water retention in the blood vessels, leaving less space for blood, and that basically changes your blood pressure. So higher blood pressure will affect the functioning of vital organs, including the heart, the kidney, leading to these lifelong conditions. Studies have even linked higher salt consumption with gastric cancer, gastroenteritis related cancer. The cancer of the gastro tract has been linked with higher salt consumption. So clearly the health risk is very high when it comes to salt consumption, which contains high levels of sodium. So that is why WHO has now come out with a new recommendation. It has issued a new set of guidelines encouraging people to replace sodium chloride with potassium chloride. Compared to sodium, potassium doesn't have that water retention effect. In fact, potassium can even play a positive role in regulating blood pressure, thus playing a long-term role in tackling non-communicable diseases such as cardiovascular diseases. So WHO is encouraging the people, the healthcare institutions, governments to promote potassium chloride as a replacement, as a safer alternative for sodium chloride, and to limit sodium chloride consumption to 2 grams per day. So that is the big update coming here from WHO. So there can be a prelims question based on this. So potassium chloride is a good substitute, a relatively safer substitute for sodium chloride. Is that clear? So on this note, I bring today's analysis of the Hindu newspaper to an end. I hope you guys have liked the session. Today we had fewer articles, but we have tried to comprehensively cover all the important ones. So that is it for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day.